Oh, Obama knew. He for sure knew. You know, that last IG report on James Comey's stealing and leaking FBI files on President Trump, including classified information, lying about it, included Comey's admission he went and confronted then President-elect Trump with the dossier.
Right.
Not to report to him about what's going on, but to see if he could catch him in a reaction that would help him, frankly, be prosecuted or targeted further. Kind of a spy operation against the president. Well, you know who he met with the day before that took place? The President of the United States, Barack Obama. They all met in the Oval Office. Obama, Biden, I think Susan Rice was there, obviously Comey, I think Brennan and Clapper were there, and they all talked about the dossier. So this was an Obama job. It wasn't a deep state job. Obama's responsible.
Just how is the impeachment investigation into President Trump highly irregular? Why does Tom Fitton think there are more FISA abuses that might be uncovered in the soon-to-be-released Horowitz report? And why does he think President Obama was ultimately responsible for the Spygate scandal? This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Today we sit down with Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, which exposes government corruption with litigation and Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, requests. Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Wonderful to have you back on the show.
Hey, thanks, John.
So, Tom, today we had this impeachment inquiry resolution, a vote in the House. Your reaction?
Well, in some ways it's more of the same, but on the other hand, it's a bad day for the Republic because it's not really an impeachment resolution, it's a coup resolution. It ratifies and endorses the abusive investigation by Schiff, that was corruptly formed for this shady leak to him that he lied about. It's being corruptly pursued. And there's nothing that much that's going to change there. He'll continue his secret hearings, his secret testimony that deprives the president of any meaningful input in terms of having his interests represented, the interests of the Constitution as president, and certainly his interests as a United States citizen. And so they're going to then concoct this impeachment inquiry before the Judiciary Committee, which may or may not be full-blown hearings. It could be just a rubber stamp. So there's nothing here to reassure the American people that fairness is here, that the rule of law is being protected, or that the Constitution is being upheld. So it's a bad day, but on the other hand, it's going to be more of the same in the sense nothing's going to change procedurally, practically speaking, in the House.
So, but people are saying this is supposed to open things up. That's what I heard being said.
Well, in theory, it could be opened up, but not just now. And it's all at the sufferance of the House majority, the Democrats.
Okay.
And in order to get subpoenas in the medium and long run, the Republicans are going to have to explain what they want to do and put all their cards on the table and then get the blessing of their Democratic colleagues, whose goal really is to impeach the president. I mean, I call it the Alice in Wonderland impeachment.
Okay.
They already have the verdict, and we're never really going to see the evidence because there's really no evidence justifying the radical approach that they're taking, which is to remove the president from office.
So you think they're basically just doing hearings and hunting for something that will be impeachable?
No, they have a pretext, which is the Ukrainian call, which was perfectly appropriate. So it's not a reason, it's an excuse.
You mean appropriate?
Oh, I think the president has every right to ask the Ukrainians what went on and what's going on with the corruption that intersects with the United States interests here. You have to remember what Ukraine did. They leaked the infamous Black Ledger targeting Paul Manafort. Right. One of their top people wrote an op-ed attacking the president shortly before the election. They were colluding with the Democrats to provide dirt on President Trump. And don't believe me, Politico acknowledges that the Ukrainians were worried, hey, we put our thumb on the scales on this election. We hope Trump isn't still mad at us. And but it wasn't about President Trump per se as a politician. It's about why is this government involved in this corruption that saw the Obama administration collude with the Ukrainians, collude with the Russians through Hillary Clinton. Who knows who else was involved? The United Kingdom, the Italians, the Australians, the Germans. So you had all that massive collusion, and the president's going to be impeached for asking questions about it before he authorizes a massive sale to Ukraine. By the way, a sale that the Obama administration would never have authorized. This is a core attack on our Constitution, and we have politicians of one party hijacking this awesome power of impeachment for illicit purposes. And so, the Republic's under attack.
Tom, maybe you can help us understand, how these rules work exactly. I understand that the House majority has every right to run impeachment whatever way they want based on the Constitution. That's what I've heard. I'd like you to kind of speak to that a little bit. But also, we've also heard that, House intelligence is involved, and we've seen House intelligence is involved. That's very irregular, and also, it seems like under the current rules, the president isn't going to be allowed to have counsel with House intelligence, maybe with judiciary. It all gets very super complicated for the typical person who's watching the news or listening. Can you break this down for us a bit?
Look, the House Democrats are throwing lateral passes to get down the football field to the goal of impeachment, and that includes using the House Intelligence Committee in a way it's never been used before, which is to conduct an impeachment investigation of the president. And this isn't even a traditional standing committee of the House. The Judiciary Committee, for instance, would be the committee that you would have do the investigation. Instead, they've got the Intelligence Committee that is a select committee, meaning it's not necessarily a permanent committee of the
Right.
House doing this. So it's extraordinary, and it's never been done before. And it's a further indication of the irregular nature of the impeachment effort. It's not normal. And when something's not normal, it's usually not constitutional, at least in the full sense of the word. Look, I acknowledge impeachment's part of the Constitution, but it doesn't overpower the rest of the Constitution. It doesn't take away the president's due process rights. It can't take away the president's due process rights. It can't be used to decimate the executive branch. It can't be used to take classified information and just throw it into the public domain without regard to national security. Can't be used to justify illegal communications potentially between perhaps the leaker and Adam Schiff, the head of the House Intelligence Committee. So there's all this misconduct that impeachment's trying to kind of just power through, because it's all about getting President Trump. And I don't necessarily think it's all about getting President Trump in the sense that that's their key, that's one of the key motivations here. I think it's about protecting themselves, because as long as we're talking about coups or impeachment, as they want to say, we're not talking about the startling revelation in the last few weeks that the Justice Department has concluded that there's evidence of criminal activity in the spy targeting of President Trump and previously, obviously, candidate Trump. So, of course, the Democrats want to talk about impeaching Trump, because the Justice Department just figured out, there's potentially crimes here in this massive corruption scandal that we know as Spygate.
I actually really want to explore this with you in just a second. In comparison to let's say the Clinton impeachment, right? Are you seeing a lot of differences?
Well, the impeachment of Bill Clinton was based on a report, a voluminous report, grand jury testimony made public through the report, witness interviews, document reviews, documents that were gathered, that were sent under a lawful process by Kenneth Starr. There was an independent counsel law at the time that required sending the material over to the Congress. So they were working off of material gathered under due process of law.
Okay.
Okay? None of that is here. None of that is here. I mean, even the Nixon impeachment kind of was contingent in many ways on getting access to grand jury information. And here they're just doing these Star Chamber-like procedures and proceedings in which reportedly Republicans can't even ask key questions.
Right, that's what we've heard.
The president has no say. And it's just an abomination unto the Constitution, this whole process. And that's why I call it a coup.
Any FOIA requests Judicial Watch has in around all these issues?
Oh, sure. You know, they're afraid to talk about their whistleblower. Of course, we've got FOIA requests out there about the whistleblower. The Democrats don't want to talk about their whistleblower because of the corruption involved in his communications with Adam Schiff.
Right.
And now there's evidence out there. I don't know if it's the guy everyone's talking about. I can't even remember his name now. But if he is who everyone thinks he is, oh boy, they don't want him being part of the story because he's evidently someone who's very political and an anti-Trumper. Right. But of course, Judicial Watch isn't going to be cowed by Adam Schiff or the House Democrats. We're asking questions from the Inspector General of the intelligence community that supposedly handled this so-called whistleblower complaint under the Freedom of Information Act. And you know, and the same goes on the Ukraine issue. The Biden corruption scandal is a big scandal. The Democrats' reactions to President Trump's asking questions about it tells you that something there. I tell you what, if I were President Trump, I would be calling the Ukrainians back to make sure they're doing something because obviously he's at a nerve. I'd be asking the Justice Department, you really need to be looking into this because look at what the House Democrats are doing. They're obviously very concerned. That to me is all evidence of corruption. And the president has an absolute right, indeed an obligation to enforce the law here. And the House Democrats say, if you ask questions about Joe Biden, we're going to remove you from office. If you ask questions about the collusion and Spygate, we're going to remove you from office. Talk about Big Brother. Talk about George Orwell. This is just turns our constitutional protections on their head.
Tom, you know, just before we jump to Spygate, because I really want to kind of dig into that a little bit. I have a question about the Clinton email case. That's you know, basically ongoing.
Also related.
Yeah. Yeah, no, all these things are related. And this judge recently suggested that Judicial Watch actually shake the tree a bit, I think was the exact quote.
Well, we had gotten discovery from Judge Royce Lamberth in a case about Benghazi that asked for Hillary Clinton's materials directly, and they played games with us about her emails, and it was the case that forced them to finally admit that she had these emails that no one knew about, at least no one outside the State Department, certainly the American public didn't know about it. And the judge had granted us discovery. We're bringing in witnesses that are raising questions about the Obama White House's involvement in the cover-up. And witness after witness testified Hillary Clinton was warned or should have known about her email use and certainly its impact on national security and the Freedom of Information Act. So the judge granted us even additional discovery, and we're getting more documents showing that there were emails related to Benghazi that the State Department knew about but withheld. Right. Emails showing that senior officials knew about Hillary Clinton's email, didn't want it widely known. So the cover-up's been confirmed 6 ways to Sunday by Judicial Watch's discoveries and evidence gathering. And now the judge is currently contemplating whether to bring Hillary Clinton in. Her lawyers oppose our request to question her under oath. Now the judge is considering whether to grant it.
So that's where we're at. We're basically waiting.
And that's
to see what the judge decides.
That's where we're at, you know. And but on top of that, and this is something the media doesn't want to cover as well, you had this State Department security report confirm hundreds of national security violations on the Clinton email system. And the media has wrongly reported that it concluded there was no violations.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, or no purposeful violations. Well, in fact, it specifically concluded otherwise, that there were instances, they said it was rare, but it happened, of people deliberately putting classified information onto this unsecure system for convenience. Who does that sound like? No prosecutions. And I tell you what, Secretary Pompeo should refer that report to the Justice Department, and it's reason number 99 to reopen and begin a competent criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's email misconduct.
So let's dive into Spygate, okay? There is this criminal investigation we've heard has been begun by John Durham. What are the implications of this?
Well, the senior leadership of the FBI and the CIA and the Justice Department, and who knows what other agencies, need to be very concerned about this. Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok Page, obviously, Loretta Lynch, anyone involved in the FISA-gate targeting of Trump, or generally the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign as it relates to Russia. Because remember what Mr. Barr, Attorney General Barr, said he was investigating: the origins and the decision-making to open this extraordinary counterintelligence investigation, which was really just an excuse to try to put Trump in jail, on whether there was Russia collusion between the Trump world and, Russia collusion with Trump world. Now we've learned, after a preliminary review by his designee, U.S. Attorney Durham, that there's evidence of criminal activity warranting further investigation. Well, that's tremendous news, in the sense that everyone have you believe it was legitimate, and they're just complaining that he was being targeted. They had a good faith-based reason to investigate him. Well, not according to this Justice Department investigation. Crimes were committed, evidently. Look, we're expected to believe that they had a good faith basis to target Trump. Well, now we're getting evidence from the Justice Department, certainly their public statements or the leaks to the New York Times and other publications, that there's evidence that there are crimes behind the targeting of Trump. Well, there's only a limited number of people who they could be targeting in that regard, and they're all names we would know. And so I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm hopeful there will be prosecutions, because, the conspiracy and the violations of law are legion in my view. And in many ways, this is what I think the coup is about. They used Mueller to try to freeze the Justice Department, and I think they're using the coup to try to make the Justice Department, make it harder for the Justice Department to investigate the crimes behind Spygate.
Very, very interesting. So, you recently obtained, speaking of, some of the names that we should know, the text messages between Strzok and Page, some new batches of these.
Yeah, I think there were emails, and they were emails that we were told didn't exist because Bruce Orr, whose wife Nellie Orr worked for Fusion GPS, and despite that, he was heavily involved in basically laundering the Clinton spy ring information into the Justice Department and FBI. He testified that he had a meeting or two with Strzok. So we asked about this, and the Justice Department comes back and says, we don't have any records. And so, we said, look, there's a discussion about what went on here, that there was a communication of some type. So the Justice Department says that we don't have records. We say that's not to be believed. We're suing in court, and lo and behold, the Justice Department finds records showing that Strzok, Page, and Bruce Orr were working together on, it looks like, Russiagate, which is, as I say, the illegal targeting of President Trump. It's magic, Oh, we don't have the records. We sue. Oh, I guess we do have the records.
It's also been reported that John Durham is very, quote unquote, very interested in Brennan and Clapper, these two officials.
Well, this is my theory of the case.
Okay.
Whenever you hear the other side say that there was, quote, Russia intelligence sources saying that the Russians were working with the Trump campaign, you should discount that. And I think what they've concluded, and I suspect what the evidence will show, is that there was never really any intelligence justifying an investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. It was all material manufactured by the Obama FBI or CIA, people that they were running, either confidential informants or assets, and obviously the Clinton DNC Fusion GPS operation that was probably just recycling that material. I call it, you saw this in the FISA-gate warrants. So they say, here's our evidence, Your Honors, to justify this extraordinary spy operation targeting President Trump. Well, we've got the dossier. Oh, we've got a report about the dossier. Oh, we had a communication with the Senate about the dossier. Oh, it looks like the State Department was actually using the dossier too and creating a dossier based on the dossier. So that's 4 pieces of information. Well, you know, that's like asking who are your sources and you telling me, myself, and I. And I call it the self-licking ice cream cone. They're kind of generating the dirt, using reports and reactions to that dirt and their investigation of that dirt to say, hey, look, there's something there. And it's just a circular investigative activity, but horribly corrupt.
Do you think it's possible, given this interest in Clapper and Brennan and so forth, that this went all the way to the top?
Oh, Obama knew. He for sure knew. You know, that last IG report on James Comey's stealing and leaking FBI files on President Trump, including classified information, lying about it, included Comey's admission he went and confronted then President-elect Trump with the dossier.
Right.
Not to report to him about what's going on, but to see if he could catch him in a reaction that would help him, frankly, be prosecuted or targeted further. Kind of a spy operation against the president. Well, you know who he met with the day before that took place? The President of the United States, Barack Obama. They all met in the Oval Office. Obama, Biden, I think Susan Rice was there, obviously Comey, I think Brennan and Clapper were there, and they all talked about the dossier. So this was an Obama job. It wasn't a deep state job. Obama's responsible.
What are the implications of this in your mind? I mean, this is.
Well, I don't think Obama's going to be indicted, but I tell you what, if you're talking about impeaching presidents, that's the sort of thing you need to be considering. So rather than admit to the terrible scandal and misconduct and potential crimes of the prior administration, they're targeting the president who was the victim of those crimes. What a terrible day for justice.
You know, there's a lot of information out there now related to Spygate and so forth, and on my mind, I think on everybody's mind, because it was supposed to come out at the end of the month originally, is, of course, the Horowitz report. And, you know, so he's concluded this investigation into the potential FISA abuse and so forth. It's being classified, you know, as we speak. What are your expectations of the Horowitz report?
Well, I think they're going to confirm what's already known in the public record, that, because remember what we already know, that the FISA-gate applications, the FISA applications were fraudulent, because we've got key portions of them already being released. We already know that the FBI had fired the key person behind the FISA warrant applications, Christopher Steele. He created the dossier. They didn't really tell the court the full nature of what he was up to and the full background on that. So all of that's kind of already out there. Mm-hmm. So I think they're going to conclude that the FISA court was defrauded. I think what's going to be interesting to know if there were other FISA warrants, because remember, the only FISA warrant the government's admitted to is the one against Carter Page. Right. Many people believe there's at least 4 or 5 FISA warrants out there, including against General Flynn. We asked for instance, the FISA warrant, if there was a FISA warrant on General Flynn, and the response from the agency was they couldn't confirm or deny it. So it doesn't mean yes, there was, but they ain't telling us whether there was a FISA warrant or not.
You know, one of the things that...
So I guess my point on this is, we think we know the full scope of the FISA-gate corruption. My guess is there were other FISA abuses that we're going to learn about because of the IG report.
A number of people are concerned, including Senator Grassley at one point. You remember he suggested that, why is this I think he was thinking, why is this taking so long? He's worried that there might be an attempted deep sixth. I think he used that term, the report. I know you're very skeptical of the government readily providing information. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we're going to see what the report is like and whether it's sufficiently transparent. All we can do is wait and see. I mean, there's a process, and unsurprising to a group that spends years litigating Freedom of Information Act requests, it's going on longer than the public wants. You know, welcome to our world.
I'm wondering if you could clarify one thing. I think for our audiences, this is something for you and I, we probably are somewhat clear on it, but there's a pretty stark distinction between what Horowitz is doing and what Durham is doing. I'm wondering, you know, from your level of expertise, if you could just kind of explain that.
Well, Horowitz doesn't have subpoena power necessarily. He can't require people who've left government to talk to him. He is, in theory, focusing on a more narrow issue than what U.S. Attorney Durham would be able to investigate. Now that this is escalated into a criminal investigation, at least under Durham, he can bring in grand juries, he can get other resources assigned to him to help answer the questions that he has about the potential crimes or evidence of crimes that he's evidently already found. So, look, the FISA warrants are just one aspect of the spy operation against President Trump. There's a whole lot of other things that went on. For instance, unmaskings, where you had intelligence reports and American citizens getting caught up in foreign intelligence surveillance and then having their identities wrongly revealed to Obama appointees who are seemingly using the NSA spy operation to Google any dirt they could get on Trump world. I hope Durham's looking at that.
We were just speaking with Congressman Nunes about that. Obviously, he was very important to finding those unmasking.
No, you know, and remember, they were lying to Congress about what they were doing or keeping them in the dark, which suggests misconduct. They didn't tell President Trump what they were doing in terms of any concerns they had about Russia attempts to influence his campaign. They had an obligation under the law to brief him on that. Indeed, President Obama, he directed his people to think about ways to keep material from President Trump. Unbelievable corruption.
So, you know, you spoke to this a little bit at the beginning, but, you know, all of this is happening at the same time, right? On one hand, we have impeachment inquiry, we're having the votes happening, we're having what you're describing as a very unfair process. On the other hand, we have John Durham looking into criminality and the Horowitz report imminently coming out. There's seems to be a tight relationship.
Well, in many ways, however outrageous this coup is, it's going to fail in the Senate. Either the Senate's going to cut it short, which is what I think it ought to do, which is reject outright the idea of this abusive process being the basis for a full Senate trial. They just say, hey, look, you know, we're not even going to take it up in the full trial as a full trial. We're going to summarily dismiss it, or probably, you know, we're not even going to give it to any proper consideration that a traditional impeachment might get. So it could be over before you know it, but still very damaging to the republic because it's using this core constitutional power to abuse the presidency and trying to impair his ability to function. But this criminal investigation is going to continue, and you know, I run hot and cold as to whether it will result in prosecutions, because the deep state, as we can see here, has many ways of reacting and trying to subvert the rule of law. You know, I often joke that if Attorney General Barr is going to indict anyone, he'll have to write it himself because he's just surrounded by thousands of James Comeys in the Justice Department.
Wow. So what do you make of these, you know, suggestions that Barr and more recently Durham are, you know, kind of playing this partisan role, just supporting the president, doing what he's following his bidding?
Oh, that's silly. I mean, this same Justice Department is protecting Hillary Clinton. The State Department's protecting Hillary Clinton. The Justice Department and the FBI are delaying the release of records about Strzok and Page. Look, the Justice Department is proceeding in the ordinary course in extraordinary circumstances, in the sense that they've got this outrageous political pressure to protect people from the consequences of evident criminal misconduct. People very close to the party running, well, actually the leaders of the party running the impeachment on President Trump. So, I mean, given the lawlessness involved, the Justice Department is proceeding pretty darn slowly, and maybe too slowly for a lot of us.
You know, something just came to mind actually is this, that I think Steve Bannon has been recently quoted as saying that Nancy Pelosi is kind of demonstrating, I think, a master class in political warfare. I can't remember the exact quote or something.
Yeah, I've been concerned about the haplessness of the response, not by the president directly. I mean, he's seen almost immediately what's at issue here and calling it a coup and things like that. It's just that the legal team in the White House and the Justice Department kind of just dropped all of his legal defenses. I don't understand why they're not going to court to insist about the protection of confidential information, classified information, protect the prerogatives of the executive branch. I mean, to have all of these ambassadors talk about communications with foreign leaders and such, I mean, typically that's classified. And there's no one defending the rule of law on behalf of the president, at least sufficiently so. And, or they should be demanding due process in this process as well. And the only way you do that is by asking for the court to intervene. I mean, just because it's impeachment doesn't mean you throw your rights get torn apart. Your other constitutional rights get torn apart.
But as you're describing, you know, if this isn't actually going to go anywhere past the Senate, if you're right, then what consequence is all this stuff that's happening in the House?
Well, they're abusing this constitutional power to impact, to protect their political allies from criminal prosecution. In my view, it's a massive obstruction of justice operation.
Okay.
And then you got the political side of it, where they're hoping tarring the president with impeachment would make it harder for him to be reelected. And you know, impeachment is whatever the House votes it out to be. You know, if they get the majority, they can impeach you for, you know, a jaywalking. But obviously, that would be abuse of the power, and we're seeing that here. The president did nothing wrong. In fact, he did everything right with Ukraine, because he was asking questions of Ukraine that the deep state was horrified to ask. And now they're using that as an excuse to try to destroy him. And I think Republicans and Democrats, liberals, conservatives should all be concerned when you have the Constitution hijacked to try to destroy the ability of the people to choose their leaders, as opposed to the coup cabal.
So the way things are playing out right now, at this point, how do you think that impacts voters?
Oh, I don't know. You know, we sue people, we sue the government, and the political impact I leave to the analysts. I think there's a general, from both political parties though, and just based on the widespread, tremendous support that Judicial Watch has. I mean, we're one of the most widely supported groups in the country, at least on the conservative side of the aisle. People are terribly concerned about corruption. President Trump won on the promise to drain the swamp, and he got a lot of Democrats who voting for him because of that.
Right.
And you know, I think this is kind of a unity issue, which is that people are concerned about corruption in Washington, D.C. So the question, I guess, come election time, is who are the voters going to decide were the corrupt parties in this fight? Trump or those trying to take him out?
It's fascinating, because that seems exactly like what it's like when I look at the different messaging that's out there.
Yeah, because you have one side saying, I'm corrupt, I'm not corrupt, you're corrupt, and now they're pointing fingers at each other. And you know, and I've laid out what I think the facts show. You know, and I'm just giving you an opinion. It's an informed opinion in the sense that we've litigated dozens of lawsuits on these issues. We've looked at the documents. We've seen the corruption based on government documents about what's going on. And we've seen who the victim is. It's the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And I don't say that because, oh, I like his conservative policies, or I like the fact my taxes have been cut, or anything else. It's just this is just kind of a basic rule of law issue. It was a government corruption issue. The president, in many ways, is whistleblower in chief, and I would argue he's being retaliated against for blowing the whistle on Ukraine and the deep state attack on him.
Tom Fitton, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.